Chapter 1191. Outside the spirit cloud realm, Qin Baiyuan did not leave but stood guard there. Although he allowed Chu Xiu to enter the spirit cloud realm, he could not help but think of what his master had told him in the past, about the terrifying existence that was sealed in the spirit cloud realm. If it was his own disciple, Qin Baiyuan would be more at ease, but he was also afraid that Chu Xiu could not help but enter to find out what was going on. Although Chu Xiu could not destroy the spirit formation with his strength, it was better to be safe than sorry. At this moment, a powerful fluctuation of power came from the spirit cloud realm. As the previous sect master, Qin Baiyuan had taught countless disciples. He could almost instantly tell that this was the fluctuation of condensing a domain and officially stepping into the profound understanding realm. At this moment, Qin Baiyuan suddenly felt uncomfortable, as if he had eaten a fly. It was not surprising that Chu Xiu had broken through to the profound understanding realm. The cultivation that Chu Xiu had shown before was already at the peak of the true fire spirit refinement realm. In terms of strength, he had even surpassed some existences in the profound understanding realm. What made Qin Baiyuan worried was that Chu Xiu had just beaten up a disciple of High Heaven sect, and in the end, he had used their blessed cave of High Heaven sect to step into the profound understanding realm. This was not a good feeling. At this time in the spirit cloud realm, the power around Chu Xiu began to shrink and expand. A layer of misty domain spread from his body 10 feet, and finally to 1,000 feet. In that misty domain, the space rules were distorted, and all existences were being strangled. The world was in chaos, and yin and yang were reversed. Only Chu Xiu was the only true god in the domain. Tianhun looked at Chu Xiu with a smile and said, "Not bad, very good. I knew that even if all your memories have been erased, you are still the Earth Soul incarnation of Dugu Weiwei. This speed of comprehension is normal." Chu Xiu let out a long sigh and said, "The domain that Dugu Weiwei condensed in the past, is it the same as mine?" Tianhun shook his head. "It's not the same. What Dugu Weiwei condensed is the myriad demon domain. You should have been to the primitive demon cave before. When Dugu Weiwei opens his domain, within that domain is the primitive demon cave, but it is the primitive demon cave that belongs to Dugu Weiwei." Chu Xiu was shocked when he heard Tianhuan's words. The environment of the primitive demon cave could actually be recreated using human strength. Just how terrifying was Dugu Weiwei's domain? But you don't have to worry. The path you're taking is already different from the one Dugu Weiwei arranged for you to take. Although the domain you've condensed now is definitely not comparable to Dugu Weiwei's domain now, no one knows how far it will grow in the future. Chu Xiu nodded. But what should his domain be called? Chu Xiu's domain could be said to be different from the domains condensed by all the heaven and earth mysterious realm martial artists. It did not contain any attributes. Could it be called the unique and righteous domain? Although the more words it had, the more difficult it was to pronounce. After thinking about it, Chu Xiu decided to call it the divine domain. He was the true god that controlled everything in the domain, so it was called the divine domain. That's right. How much do you know about the heavenly gates? Chu Xiu suddenly asked. Tianhun immediately reacted. Do you have a grudge against the heavenly gates? Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and nodded. Of course I do. I have a huge grudge. The current heavenly gates master almost killed me. Of course, without him, I would not have been able to come to the Dalu Ocean. Tianhun shook his head slightly. This group of watchdogs is really courting death. Watchdogs? Tianhun said. The heavenly gates used to be the gatekeepers, but now they are just watchdogs. Furthermore, they are the kind of watchdogs that have betrayed their masters. The origin of the heavenly gates was actually very simple. In the past, when people from the lower realm came to the Dalu Ocean, they definitely had to open a door, and that door was the heavenly gates. The Dalu Ocean people did not want to face the horror of the great ancient calamity. After coming to the Dalu Ocean, they were also worried that the power of the great ancient calamity would spread to the Dalu Ocean. Therefore, they built a formation in the Dalu Ocean and the heavenly gates at the same time to seal the passage. They also set up an unimaginable seal in the heavenly gates. The first generation of guardians of the heavenly gates were gatekeepers with the will to die. Their families, masters, and disciples had all been arranged by the Dalu Ocean. while they guarded the heavenly gates in the lower realm with the determination to die 10 times. However, after that, although the great ancient calamity was terrifying, there was still a chance of survival. In particular, after the mortal world and the mortal world merged, a new world was created, and the great ancient calamity dissipated. In the past few generations, the gatekeepers of the heavenly gates were very normal. They monitored the lower realm to prevent the great ancient calamity from happening again. Every once in a while they would send some news through this method. However, after a few generations, the subsequent gatekeepers of the heavenly gates had nothing to do with the previous generations. Naturally, they had some strange ideas. At this point, Tianhun laughed coldly and said, "Since ancient times, everything has a fixed number. Only the human heart is immeasurable. The people from the celestial of absolute heaven had missed out on this point." The subsequent generations of celestial gate guardians were no longer willing to simply be gatekeepers. Thus, they closed the passageway connecting to the higher realm and completely sealed off the formation. However, they used the grotto heavens and blessed lands left behind by the celestial gate in the past to cultivate. Furthermore, because the heavenly gates was a place that connected the upper and lower realms, the vitality of the heaven and earth was abnormally rich and thick. It was a genuine treasure land. From then on, there were no gatekeepers of the heavenly gates. There were only the master of the heavenly gates and the 9 divine generals. Chu Xiu said, "So the people of the heavenly gates collected the heavenly keys because they didn't want others to discover their secret. Or rather, they didn't want people from the lower realm to come to the Daoyu Ocean and let the Daoyu Ocean know about the situation in the heavenly gates?" Tianhun nodded and said, "That's more or less what they meant. The heavenly gates unilaterally blocked the formation and cut off the source of news. Thus, the Daoyu Ocean people still don't know about the situation in the heavenly gates. They thought that something had happened to the gatekeepers that they had left behind. However, those fellows were courting death. 500 years ago, they provoked Dugu Weiwei and were almost slaughtered. Now they have come to provoke you. This is really fate." Chu Xiu frowned and said, "Then why didn't Dugu Weiwei destroy the heavenly gates 500 years ago? Why did he give them a chance to survive?" This was what Chu Xiu was most confused about. Dugu Weiwei was not a soft-hearted person. Tianhun said, "It's very simple. It's because he wanted to stay in the heavenly gates and continue to be a watchdog. Although the heavenly gates are watchdogs that have betrayed their master, their existence is very necessary. The Daoyu Ocean and the heavenly gate seals were set up by the experts from the lower realm. These seals can last for 1,000 or even thousands of years, but they can't be preserved forever. Thus, for their own sake, the heavenly gates has to carefully strengthen these seals at all times. Once the heavenly gates are destroyed, as time passes, the seals will loosen, and the Daoyu Ocean will be reconnected with the lower realm. This will allow the Daoyu Ocean vitality of the heaven and earth to flow into the lower realm. Isn't this a good thing? At the very least, it's a good thing for the lower realm." Tianhun laughed coldly and said, "Perhaps it's a good thing for the lower realm in the beginning. However, after a period of time, when the Daoyu Ocean vitality of the heaven and earth stabilizes the passageway, the Daoyu Ocean and the lower realm will be completely connected. When that time comes, the Daoyu Ocean warriors will be able to descend, and the warriors from the lower realm will be able to ascend to the Daoyu Ocean." It sounds good, but do you think that both parties will get along peacefully? At that time, Dugu Weiwei already knew about the Daoyu Ocean's existence. However, he had just pacified the martial world, and was the sole ruler in the lower realm. He could go to the Daoyu Ocean, but how could he tolerate the Daoyu Ocean warriors coming to the lower realm? Thus, he left a chance for the heavenly gates, and allowed them to continue to be watchdogs. Chu Xiu nodded his head in understanding. If that was the case, everything made sense. At that moment, Tianhuan's expression was solemn as he said, "You have a grudge against the heavenly gates and want to destroy them. That's possible. They are just a group of watchdogs, and you can kill them whenever you want. However, before you have absolute power, it's best that you don't touch the heavenly gates." Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, "Because the Daoyu Ocean is connected to the lower realm? Don't worry, before I make full use of the Daoyu Ocean's power, I won't do such a thing." Although Chu Xiu held a grudge and really wanted to destroy the heavenly gates, he did not have the power to destroy the heavenly gates. Even if he did, he would not do so for the time being. Now that he controlled a passageway that was connected to the Daluocean, if the seal on the heavenly gates loosened, and the Daluocean vitality of the heaven and earth flowed into the lower realm, or even connected to the two realms, what advantage would Chu Xiu have? Thus, he had to turn these advantages into power before he could consider the problem of touching the heavenly gates. Tianhun shook his head and said, "That's not the reason. It's because there's a source in the heavenly gates, a source of extreme yang." Dugu Weiwei only found out about this after he reached the Daluocean. A formation that could seal two worlds was not something that ordinary formations could do. At the core of the formation in the heavenly gates, there was a source of extreme yang that belonged to the mortal realm. If Dugu Weiwei had known about this, he would definitely have destroyed the heavenly gates. Even if it meant damaging the formation and connecting the two realms, he had to obtain that source. However, it was a pity that he did not have the chance in the end. This was something that Dugu Weiwei could not do, but you have the chance to do so. The source of extreme yang is right in the middle of the passageway. Half of it is connected to the formation on the Daluocean side, while the other half is connected to the formation on the lower realm. Thus, if you can cultivate to the point where you can easily destroy the heavenly gates in the future, you must find a suitable opportunity, and make sure that there are no experts guarding the Daluocean sealed area, which is the Daluocean Divine Palace. Then, you can destroy the heavenly gates in one fell swoop, and obtain the source of extreme yang. Remember, grudges are secondary. The source of extreme yang is the most precious. Chapter 1192. Tianhun mentioned the origin several times, and his face became more serious, which showed the importance of the origin. 3 strands of essence could give one the qualifications to enter the longevity sky. What if one possessed more? Chu Xiu did not ask about this, but kept it in mind. All the doubts in Chu Xiu's mind had been answered by Tianhun, but he did not feel relieved. Instead, he felt that he had been shackled by a heavier layer of shackles. Before, Chu Xiu had always felt that he had a certain relationship with Dugu Weiwei, but he did not know what it was. Now that Chu Xiu knew about it, he felt even more pressured. For Dugu Weiwei, Tianhun and Chu Xiu were just doppelgangers that he had created, and they had their own tasks. However, these 2 doppelgangers had not completed their tasks, and they had even developed their own consciousness. Of course, he could not tolerate this. It was normal to take back one's own things. But for Chu Xiu and Tianhun, this was exactly what they could not tolerate. Tianhun had at least the memory of Dugu Weiwei 500 years ago, but Chu Xiu had nothing. Now someone told him that he was actually just a part of someone else, and that he was going to swallow him to return to his perfect state. Of course, Chu Xiu would not agree. No one knew when Dugu Weiwei, who was hiding in the netherworld heaven, would be able to break free from the shackles of the netherworld heaven. At that time, Dugu Weiwei would be even more terrifying than Dugu Weiwei, who had fought against the entire Daluocean 500 years ago. There was not much time left for Chu Xiu. In the remaining time, Tianhun seized the time to instill all the martial arts that Chu Xiu could accept into his mind, so that he could avoid many bottlenecks in the mysterious heaven and earth realm. 7 days later, the spiritual cloud realm opened again. Lu Sanjin and the others were already waiting for Chu Xiu outside the spiritual cloud realm. Seeing Chu Xiu coming out with the momentum of the mysterious heaven and earth realm, Lu Sanjin's eyes widened. "Brother Chu, have you stepped into the mysterious heaven and earth realm?" Chu Xiu nodded and said, "Why? Is it strange?" Lu Sanjin shook his head with a strange look. "No, of course not." Thinking of Chu Xiu's strength, it was not strange that he had stepped into the mysterious heaven and earth realm. However, Chu Xiu already had such battle prowess at the true fire spirit refinement realm. Now that he had reached the heaven and earth profound understanding realm, how terrifying would he be? Standing with Chu Xiu, even Lu Jianghe, he felt a little frustrated at this time. Qin Baiyuan said lightly, "If you want to chat, go out first. My high heaven sect will not keep you any longer." Lu Jianghe curled his lips. Qin Baiyuan was really stingy. It was obvious that he felt it was unfair that Brother Chu had stepped into the mysterious heaven and earth realm. After the group left the High Heaven sect, Chu Xiu asked, "Did the people of Cold River City come to trouble you while I was cultivating in the spiritual cloud realm?" Lu Sanjin shook his head. "No, they didn't dare to do anything in the High Heaven sect." Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "Brother Lu, you should tell the pavilion master to make more preparations when you go back. When Qi Wuhan was fighting you, he dared to kill you even in front of the High Heaven sect. It is conceivable that there is no room for reconciliation between the Imperial Sky Pavilion and the Cold River City. In fact, Chu Xiu didn't care if the Imperial Sky Pavilion was destroyed. However, he didn't have any foundation in the Dalu Ocean. The foundation he had accumulated in the southern barbaric land was built with the help of the Imperial Sky Pavilion. If the Imperial Sky Pavilion was destroyed, Chu Xiu's side would be extremely obvious. Therefore, the Imperial Sky Pavilion couldn't be destroyed, at least not for now. After returning to Kangwu County, Chu Xiu felt a greater sense of urgency to improve his strength. He looked for Mei Qinglian and asked, "How are the cultivators of our holy church doing in the Dalu Ocean recently?" Mei Qinglian clicked her tongue and sighed. "They've improved by leaps and bounds. Their cultivation speed is more than 10 times faster than in the lower realm. Not only them, but even the few of us are also accumulating our strength at a rapid pace." Chu Xiu nodded and said, "That's good. In the remaining time, try to arrange as many disciples of the Holy Church to enter the Dalu Ocean to cultivate." Mei Qinglian was taken aback. "But won't there be a risk of exposure?" She still remembered that Chu Xiu had told her to let people enter the Dalu Ocean in batches to cultivate, and that the elites would be given priority. She had to be careful. Why did Chu Xiu change his mind now? Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "It's urgent. Time doesn't wait for me." Chu Xiu's words made Mei Qinglian even more puzzled. The Kunlun devil cult in the lower realm might not dominate the world, but their strength had definitely reached the point where no one dared to provoke them. Time doesn't wait for me at this time? Could it be that Chu Xiu still wanted to dominate the whole Dalu Ocean? Mei Qinglian still wanted to ask something, but Chu Xiu said directly, "You can arrange the rest as you see fit. I'm going to cultivate in seclusion for a period of time. Don't call me if there's nothing too important. If there's something important, go to Elder Wei to make a decision. If Elder Wei can't handle it, then come to me." After giving these instructions, Chu Xiu immediately began to cultivate in seclusion, which made Mei Qinglian confused. It seemed that after Chu Xiu went to Lingxiao City, he became very anxious, as if some threat was coming. However, when Mei Qinglian asked Lu Jianghe and Lu Fengxian about it, nothing happened. On the contrary, their trip went very smoothly. They defeated the people of Cold River City in a martial arts gambling fight. And Chu Xiu also took this opportunity to step into the heaven and earth profound opening realm. Mei Qinglian was a little confused, but she simply stopped thinking about it and sent people to arrange these messy things. Chu Xiu could go into seclusion and leave everything to others, but she couldn't just ignore it. Just as Chu Xiu was quietly cultivating, a guest came to High Heaven sect to look for Linghu Immortal Mountain. It was a strange monk wearing a golden monk robe, with deep-set eyebrows and a high nose bridge. He did not look like someone from the Central Plains, but he was very handsome. The lines on his face seemed to have been chiseled by a knife, giving him a very masculine feeling. He also wore a string of huge Buddha beads around his neck, each of which was the size of a fist and exuded a scorching golden light. After a while, Linghu Immortal Mountain walked into the reception hall and laughed. "It turns out to be Brother Xian Jialua. Your Sanskrit religion rarely leaves the Western Territory. How come you have time to visit me?" The monk in front of him was Xian Jialua, the palace master of Sun God Temple of Sanskrit religion, Vishnu Temple. Because Linghu Immortal Mountain had traveled to the Western Territory before, he also formally visited the major sects of the Western Territory, Sanskrit religion, and Heavenly Luo Treasure Temple. But compared with the rigid monks of Heavenly Luo Treasure Temple, he got along better with the people of Sanskrit religion, so he also made many friends from Sanskrit religion. Moriha, the palace master of Illusion Celestial Palace who died at the hands of Chu Xiu before, was also one of his good friends. Xian Jialua said helplessly, I have said many times my surname is not Xin. Ling Hu Immortal Mountain nodded indifferently and said, I am used to it. What matter does Brother Xin have with me? I heard you are preparing to take over the position of Lord of Vishnu Temple? Xin Jialua had already given up on correcting Ling Hu Immortal Mountain. But when he heard that, he still had a proud expression on his face and said, more or less. But right now, I have yet to step into the realm of Martial Immortal. After I officially step into the realm of Martial Immortal, the old palace master is preparing to abdicate and pass the position of Lord of Vishnu Temple to me. Ling Hu Immortal Mountain laughed loudly and said, that is truly worthy of celebration. Brother Xin, you are well prepared. Making a breakthrough to the realm of Martial Immortal is only a matter of time. Moreover, under your leadership, Sun God Temple has become the largest temple in Vishnu Temple. Almost no one will fight you for the position of the next lord. Of course, no one will dare to fight you for it. So right now you can just calmly wait to take over the position of lord. Xin Jialua shook his head with a bitter smile and said, precisely because I am preparing to take over the position of lord, troublesome matters have come one after another. The matters that originally did not belong to my Sun God Temple have all fallen on my head. Brother Ling Hu, I will not hide it from you. This time, I have come to the Eastern Territory to find a person. Who are you looking for? The palace master of the illusion Heavenly Palace, Moriha. The palace masters of the Sanskrit religion took turns to look for Mahakala Temple. Seeing that it was already time for Moriha to take over, but he had not returned to the Sanskrit religion, the people of the Sanskrit religion began to contact Moriha. As a result, when they used a secret method to contact Moriha, they found that they could not get in touch with him. Only then did they feel that the situation was not good. So they sent Xin Jialua, who was also a member of Vishnu Temple, and was preparing to take over the position of Lord of Temple, to look for Moriha. Ling Hu Immortal Mountain patted his head and said, Moriha, I met him some time ago when my High Heaven sect and Royal Heaven Pavilion had a martial exhibition. I even chatted with him for a while. Xin Jialua hurriedly asked, what happened after that? Where did Moriha go after that? Ling Hu Immortal Mountain spread his hands and said, I don't know. He is a mysterious person. I asked him why he came to the Eastern Territory, but he did not tell me. In any case, he disappeared later. Xin Jialua frowned. If even a local snake like Ling Hu Immortal Mountain did not know about this, it would be difficult. At this time, Ling Hu Immortal Mountain said, you can't find Moriha? No matter what, he is still an expert of the heaven and earth profound understanding realm. Furthermore, with his powerful illusory technique, if he wants to escape, even I don't have the confidence to kill him. Don't worry, he should be fine. Speaking of which, I've seen someone use Moriha's illusion before. Could this guy be teaching his disciple in my East region? If you see him, you should warn him that if your Sanskrit religion comes to the Eastern Territory to preach, it will be a big taboo. If he really causes trouble, don't blame me for not showing mercy. What? Someone used Moriha's illusion technique. Who was it? Gu Zun's successor, Royal Heaven Pavilion's honored guest, Kangwu County's County Governor Chu Xiao. Chapter 1193. After coming out of High Heaven sect, Xin Jialua's originally masculine face became gloomy at this time. He was certain that there was definitely something wrong with Chu Xiao. Ling Hu Xianshan said that Chu Xiao might have learned Moriha's illusion technique from Moriha, but this was absolutely impossible. The secret arts of Sanskrit religion could never be passed on to outsiders, and Moriha's illusion technique was extremely unique to him. Even the other disciples of illusionary Heavenly King Palace had not learned it. In Moriha's words, his core illusion technique would only be passed on to disciples he thought were qualified to be his inheritor. And an outsider, no matter how talented they were, could never learn Moriha's illusion technique. Although Ling Hu Xianshan was not sure that the illusion technique Chu Xiao used belonged to Moriha. According to him, it was 80% similar. But forget 80%, even if it was only half, Xin Jialua would still come to check it out. As for the other party's identity as Imperial Heaven Pavilion's county governor, Xin Jialua had no scruples. Although they were both top Daluotian sects, The gap in strength between the two sides was not small. With the strength of Sanskrit religion, any one of its temples could destroy Imperial Heaven Pavilion. Even when Imperial Heaven Pavilion was at its peak, it did not dare to challenge Sanskrit religion. At night, Chu Xiu's entire body was shrouded by a layer of hazy mist in the secret room of Kangwu County. His aura carried a strange sense of rhythm as he breathed in and out. His strength and foundation were growing rapidly. Tianhun had all the memories of Dugu Weiwei, so naturally he also had his martial Dao insights. Although these martial Dao insights were only from 500 years ago, the Dugu Weiwei of that time was already strong enough. In addition, many of Chu Xiu's secret arts were related to Dugu Weiwei, so some of the cultivation methods given to him by Tianhun Temple could be perfectly inherited by Chu Xiu. However, Tianhun had also warned Chu Xiu that he could use the techniques that belonged to Dugu Weiwei. He could even use them without worry, but he could not use all of them. This was because the path he wanted to take had to be different from Dugu Weiwei. Only then could he possibly surpass Dugu Weiwei. If not, if Chu Xiu walked down the same path as Dugu Weiwei, even if he cultivated to the level of Dugu Weiwei 500 years ago, and released his heavenly soul, he would only be an antique from 500 years ago. What they had to face was Dugu Weiwei, who had rested and built up his strength in the netherworld heaven for 500 years. He had obtained the origin of the netherworld heaven devil path, and no one knew how much his martial arts had evolved. At that time, if he took the same path as Dugu Weiwei, he and Tianhun would definitely lose. Just as Chu Xiu was focusing all his energy on cultivation, the periphery of the governor's mansion suddenly shone with a golden light. The light of the array flowed, and the extreme power of the array erupted. Chu Xiu's eyes suddenly opened. Someone had broken into the governor's mansion. Furthermore, they had already broken into the interior. Previously, the governor's mansion had an array. However, it was only a governor's mansion, so naturally, it would not have a very good array. Thus, Chu Xiu had asked Master Yuanji to set up an array that had been passed down from the skyweeping demon Venerate in the innermost area of the governor's mansion when he had some free time. At that moment, as long as this array had a reaction, it meant that the other party had silently broken through several arrays. It was only when they encountered the array that had been passed down from the skyweeping demon Venerate that the other party was completely stopped. Chu Xiu's figure moved, and he broke through the door of the seclusion room, and appeared outside the governor's mansion. At that moment, on the east side of the governor's mansion, Zingaluo stood in midair. When he saw the array that had lit up before him, he revealed a shocked expression. One had to know that with his strength, a mere county governor manor's array formation was nothing to him at all. Who would have thought there would be such a sensitive array within the governor's mansion? It had already been activated just as he was about to break the array. Chu Xiu looked at the strange monk before him, and immediately frowned. Now that he had stepped into the profound understanding of heaven and earth realm, it was only natural that he could sense the monk's strength. Powerful, very powerful. Chu Xiu had only felt such power from a cultivator of the same level as him, Yi Xiaonan. Yi Xiaonan was likely only a step away from becoming a martial immortal. Who are you? How dare you barge into the Imperial Sky Pavilion's Kangwu County's governor's mansion? Zingaluo did not answer Chu Xiu. Instead he said coldly, "Where is Moriha?" Chu Xiu's expression did not change, but his heart clenched. Zingaluo was here for Moriha. Actually, Chu Xiu had already expected this day. Moriha was an expert of the profound understanding of heaven and earth realm, as well as the palace lord of the illusionary heavenly palace. It was impossible for the Sanskrit sect to not react to his disappearance. It was already too late for the Sanskrit sect to only come now. Chu Xiu's expression did not change in the slightest. He merely snorted coldly and said, "What Moriha? I don't know who he is. Who exactly are you?" Back then, only Su Fengshan and a few others had seen Chu Xiu kill Moriha. Although they were not Chu Xiu's trusted subordinates, they did not dare to challenge Chu Xiu. Furthermore, they were not people of many words. Thus, outsiders did not know about this matter. Although Chu Xiu did not know why Zingaluo was able to come to him, Chu Xiu was certain that Zingaluo did not know that Moriha was dead. He did not even know that Moriha had fought with him. Otherwise, Zingaluo would not have asked Chushio where Moriha was. Instead, he would have killed him. Zingaluo said coldly, still not admitting it? You have the Sanskrit sex illusion art that belongs to Moriha. Where did it come from? So this was the loophole. Chushio raised his eyebrows slightly, but he still refused to admit it. You're from the Sanskrit sect? What a joke. Why does illusion art belong to the Sanskrit sect alone? As the successor of Guzun, the cultivation methods of my lineage were collected and researched by generations of grandmasters. Is it strange that I know illusion art? Monk from the Sanskrit sect, this is not your western region. This is the eastern region. This is the Imperial Sky Pavilion. You have crossed the line. Zingaluo sneered. Using your master and the Imperial Sky Pavilion to suppress me? A martial immortal Guzun is indeed difficult to deal with, but no matter how difficult he is only one person. Do you think the Sanskrit sect is afraid of a martial immortal? As for the Imperial Sky Pavilion, they are already half dead. And you still want to use them to suppress me? What a joke. Since you're not willing to admit it, then come back to the Sanskrit sect with me and spit out everything you know. As soon as Zingaluo's voice fell, he grabbed at Chushio. Golden stellar energy condensed into a giant hand that blotted out the sky. The entire prefectural governor manor was alarmed at this moment. This light was no ordinary Buddhist light. At that moment, it was clearly night, but they seemed to see the sun. Chushio did not expect Zingaluo to make a move just like that. He was not arrogant but confident. Extremely confident. Just as he said, he really did not care about the Imperial Sky Pavilion and a Guzun. Now that Zingaluo was about to take over the position of Vishnu Temple Lord, he would not allow any mistakes in his task. Even if Chushio really had nothing to do with Moriha, he would only know after interrogating him. The giant hand with the power of the sun grabbed at Chushio. In the next moment, a misty domain spread out in front of Chushio and enveloped the giant hand. Seeing Chushio use his domain, Zingaluo could not help but sneer. It was obvious that Chushio was a cultivator who had just stepped into the Heaven and Earth Illumination realm. Veteran Heaven and Earth Illumination realm cultivators had rich combat experience and rarely used their domains. It was not that their domains were not strong enough, but when facing cultivators of the same level, they both had domains. Both sides had a deep understanding of domains, so it was too easy to counter them. However, the next moment, Zingaluo's expression suddenly changed. Everything in Chushio's domain was distorted. It was not the distortion of space, but the distortion of the laws of heaven and earth. Yin and yang were in disorder, and the 5 elements were inverted. Any power was distorted, divided, and then devoured. The only one that was normal was Chushio, who was in the center of the domain. Xi and Jialuo's strength was indeed terrifying. That scorching giant hand lasted for 3 breaths of time in the domain. It wasn't until it was 10 meters away from Chushio that it was completely distorted and destroyed. What kind of domain is this? Although Zingaluo looked young, he was actually about the same age as Ling Huxianshan. He had roamed the Daoyu Ocean world for so many years, but he had never seen such a strange domain. A domain that can kill you. As soon as Chushio's voice fell, he slashed out with the formation-breaking sword in his hand. A piercingly cold light streaked across the sky and illuminated the entire prefectural governor manor. A Sanskrit rune appeared in front of Zingaluo and easily blocked Chushio's blade. He raised his eyebrows and said, "What a sharp blade!" But unfortunately, before he could finish speaking, Shang Tianliang had already punched out from behind him. The power of withering and glory distorted the time of the 4 seasons, causing the power to dissipate with the passage of time. He had actually heard the commotion outside long ago, but he had been looking for an opportunity to launch a sneak attack. Unfortunately, Zingaluo's power was so strong that even Shang Tianliang's sneak attack did not succeed. Behind him, endless rays of scorching sunlight blossomed, rendering all attacks unable to escape. The scorching power directly blasted Shang Tianliang away. It can affect time? What a strange power. Before Zingaluo could finish sighing, a pillar of fire shot up from the depths of the prefectural governor manor and smashed down on Zingaluo. With a loud bang, the scorching sun flames around Zingaluo were instantly suppressed and extinguished. Those were genuine flames of heaven and earth, and Zingaluo's sun flames were not drawn from the sun. He was directly sent flying by the huge pillar of fire. A hint of astonishment appeared in his eyes, and he immediately turned around to leave without saying anything. However, before he left, he took a deep look at Chu Xiu with a profound gaze. Chapter 1194. With Wei Shuya's manipulation of the rootless sacred flame, Xian Jialua was temporarily pushed back. However, Chu Xiu wasn't very excited, because this meant that trouble was coming. Shang Tianliang and Wei Shuya walked over and asked, "Who was that guy just now?" "He should be from the Brahmin sect," Chu Xiu said. "He's here because of Moriha's murder. This is going to be troublesome." Wei Shuya had been in the Daluotian for a long time, so he knew the distribution of the Daluotian factions. He frowned and said, "If the Brahmin sect is here, it's going to be troublesome. With the Brahmin sect's current strength, the Imperial Sky Pavilion is no match for them. If they send a large number of cultivators, we won't be able to hold them off." Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "We don't have to worry about them sending a large number of cultivators. The Daluotian had a lot more rules than the lower realms. The major sects had coexisted peacefully for a long time, so they wouldn't easily go to someone else's territory, let alone send a large army. The western and eastern regions were so far apart. If the Brahmin sect wanted to attack, the exalted divine palace was in the middle. If they tried to come from there, it would be equivalent to offending all the Daluotian sections. Therefore, they could only come through the southern or northern regions, but they would also have to explain to the sects in those regions. Moreover, the Brahmin sect isn't taking it easy right now. Although they're strong, they've been fighting with the Daluotian temple for 10,000 years. If the Brahmin sect dares to attack me in large numbers, the temple will definitely seize the opportunity to attack. That's why the Brahmin sect won't dare to send a large army." Wei Shuya relaxed slightly when he heard Chu Xiu's words. Chu Xiu was very farsighted when it came to such matters. In the lower realms, he was very good at using these kinds of entanglements to solve difficult situations. Since he said the Brahmin sect wouldn't attack in large numbers, then they probably wouldn't. However, Chu Xiu frowned and said, "Although the Brahmin sect won't attack in large numbers, one person from time to time is enough to deal with us. The Brahmin sect has too many experts. This person hasn't even reached the martial immortal realm, but the 3 hall masters of the Brahmin sect are martial immortals, let alone the hierarch of the Brahmin sect. I heard he's a 9th layer martial immortal realm expert." Chu Xiu was having a hard time dealing with the Brahmin sect. Especially with the strength of the Sanskrit sect, Chu Xiu would not be able to stand it if they sent someone over from time to time. However, Chu Xiu didn't have any good ideas for the time being. The only way was to strengthen his defense and then deal with whatever came his way. After instructing the other disciples to be on guard, Chu Xiu looked for Master Yuanji and asked him to set up a few more formations around the prefectural governor manor, just in case. After instructing the other disciples to be on guard, Chu Xiu looked for Grandmaster Yuanji and asked him to set up a few more formations around the county governor's mansion just in case. The power of the fire earlier was extremely evil. It seemed like someone was controlling it, but it was actually the fire of the heavens and earth. Even he couldn't withstand it. Kangwu County was only one of the counties of the Imperial Sky Pavilion. Moreover, it was close to the border and wasn't very important. Why were there so many experts in it? Apart from the fact that there were no martial immortals, it was probably comparable to the Imperial Sky Pavilion's headquarters. Just like Chu Xiu, Xian Jialu also felt that this was a thorny problem. Just like Chu Xiu said, the Brahmin sect had various concerns. It was impossible for them to bring so many experts to attack Kangwu County. Moreover, even if they could, he couldn't ask for it. He was preparing to take over the position of Hall Master. Although the mission seemed insignificant, it was related to his reputation. If he couldn't even handle such a small matter, and he had to ask for help from the sect, what use would he be if the credit went to the sect? Therefore, returning to the sect to ask for help was his last resort. Moreover, he didn't have any concrete evidence to prove that Chu Xiu was related to Moriha. After all, he hadn't really experienced the illusory art. He didn't know if it was really Moriha's illusory art. However, it was basically impossible for him to capture Chushio now. Looking at the southern barbarian forest in the distance, Zingaluo mumbled, "Southern barbarian? Perhaps I can borrow their power." As soon as he finished speaking, Zingaluo crossed the southern barbarian forest and headed straight for the southern region. He couldn't borrow the power of the Brahmin sect, but he could borrow the power of others. For example, the southern region was very close to southern barbarian. They were only separated by a dense forest. Compared to the eastern region's climate and terrain, the southern region was humid and rainy. Forests and ravines were everywhere, and there were very few plains. Therefore, some prefectures were even built on cliffs, and some sects were hidden in the forests. As Xian Jialua walked through the humid and stuffy forest, his entire body was surrounded by scorching astral energy. Wherever he passed, there was a layer of mist. However, the further he went, the stranger the things he could see. There was a giant blood-red tree with human heads, skeletons, and skulls that hadn't had time to rot. There was also a broken bridge with a scarlet stream flowing under it. Even the edge of the broken bridge could be seen. It wasn't a bridge at all, but the ribs of a huge creature. There were also all kinds of strange statues along the way. This made Zingaluo frown. What kind of aesthetic did the people from the blissful demon palace have? After walking for a few more kilometers, what appeared in front of Zingaluo was a normal palace complex. It was completely black and exuded a strong demonic aura. The aura soared into the sky. Within the range of the palace, all birds and beasts were extinct, and there was only silence. This was the blissful demon palace. To be precise, it was a branch palace of the blissful demon palace guarding the southern barbarian border. It was also the strongest branch palace. It was responsible for entering the southern barbarian forest to capture some fierce beasts and even barbarians for the blissful demon palace to study. Fansex Zingaluo requests an audience. After a while, Zingaluo was politely welcomed into the blissful demon palace. A middle-aged man wearing black armor with a slightly sinister appearance walked over and laughed. "I heard that Brother Zingaluo has become the lord of the Vishnu palace. Congratulations." Zingaluo shook his head. "My surname is not Zingaluo, and I'm not the lord yet. Only a martial immortal can be the lord of the Vishnu palace." The person in front of him was the lord of this branch palace of the blissful demon palace, Nine Nether Devil Ming Xuanyu. Although Ming Xuanyu wasn't in the martial immortal realm, he was similar to Zingaluo. He was at the peak of the mysterious heaven and earth realm, and he had a chance to enter the martial immortal realm. It's about the same. It's just a matter of time. As he spoke, Ming Xuanyu asked someone to bring over a crystal pot. There was a kind of viscous liquid in it, like blood. "Brother Xian, please have a taste. This is something I've researched recently. I've gathered the blood from the hearts of several ferocious beasts, and I've also taken the blood of a powerful berserker tribe leader, and mixed it with his blood. Drink it, and your blood will boil and your body will be refined." Zingaluo frowned slightly. "Forget it, I don't want to eat meat." The blissful demon palace always liked to research these strange things. This had been criticized by many people in Jianghu. Ming Xuanyu took a sip and said in surprise, "Isn't this a habit of the heavenly Luo treasure temple? Since when did the Sanskrit sect have this habit?" Zingaluo coughed and said, "Isn't this a habit of the heavenly Luo treasure temple? Since when did the Sanskrit sect have this habit?" "Oh, what is it?" Zingaluo said in a deep voice. "I want to borrow some people from the blissful demon palace to destroy the Kangwu county in the eastern region, and bring the county governor to the Sanskrit sect. He has some secrets about the people of the Sanskrit sect. I must get them." Ming Xuanyu couldn't help but frown. It was true that he knew Zingaluo and they had some friendship. However, to be honest, they could only be considered friends if there was no conflict of interest between them. If there was a conflict of interest, however, this little bit of friendship could make them turn against each other. After pondering for a moment, Ming Xuanyu said, "This is a little difficult. The blissful demon palace is in the southern region, but the other party is in the eastern region. Crossing borders is a taboo. You know this. Moreover, the other party is from the Imperial Sky Pavilion. If I touch him, It will be hard to explain. Zingaluo said calmly. Don't worry, I'm not asking you to cross borders. I'm not asking you to make a move in Kangwu County, but in the southern barbaric land. That's not considered Kangwu County's territory. Also, you don't have to worry about the Imperial Sky Pavilion. I've just returned from the eastern region. I believe you've heard about the situation there. Right now, the Imperial Sky Pavilion only has one martial immortal, and is besieged by internal and external troubles. Even if I touch the county governor, what can they do? Ming Xuanyu still didn't say anything. Indeed, they couldn't do anything. The blissful demon palace didn't fear the Imperial Sky Pavilion. However, the problem was, while they didn't fear the Imperial Sky Pavilion, with the little bit of friendship between them, even if Zingaluo came and treated him courteously, it would be far from enough for him to take out the real deal. Seeing Ming Xuanyu's expression, Zingaluo couldn't help but sneer inwardly. However, on the surface he said calmly, Brother Ming, there are benefits in this. I'm not asking you to make a move for nothing. I don't know what method Chu Xiu used, but he actually managed to control a tribe of the southern barbaric land. He can make the tribe fight for him. I believe this method, or perhaps this tribe, is something the blissful demon palace needs, right? Once Zingaluo said that, Ming Xuanyu's expression immediately changed. In fact, the relationship between Chu Xiu and the Blacknet tribe could no longer be concealed. Zingaluo had obtained a lot of information about Chu Xiu from Linghu Immortal Mountain. The Blacknet tribe had attacked so many times in a row, and the weapons in their hands, their relationship with Kangwu County, and so on had long been noticed by others. However, no one bothered to do anything about it. For the Imperial Sky Pavilion, Chu Xiu was one of their own. As long as he could guarantee the peace of the southern barbaric land, it was fine. As for the High Heaven sect, it didn't matter since they were located in the hinterland of the Eastern Territory, and didn't border the southern barbaric land. However, the blissful demon palace was very concerned about this news because they really needed these barbarians. The blissful demon palace always liked to research all kinds of evil things. Some of them even needed to use human lives or the flesh and blood of experts to experiment. Attacking other cultivators would ruin their reputation, and they would easily become the target of public criticism. Therefore, they set their sights on these barbarians. Being able to control a barbarian tribe was quite useful to the blissful demon palace. Chapter 1195. The main purpose of the blissful demon palace's branch palace that Ming Xuanyu oversaw was to capture the ferocious beasts in the Dilua mountain range. Of course, there were also barbarians among them, who were used for various experiments by the blissful demon palace. So when Ming Xuanyu heard from Xian Jialua that Chu Xiu could control a barbarian tribe, he immediately thought of how useful it would be for the blissful demon palace. The barbarians in the Dilua mountain range were not weak. He could deal with some small tribes, but if he were to provoke a large tribe, it would cause the large tribes in the depths of the Dilua mountain range to join forces against him. That would be very difficult to deal with. If he could be like Chu Xiu and control a large tribe in the southern barbarian land, it would be much more convenient for him to have them help him capture people. However, Ming Xuanyu still didn't agree to Xian Jialua's request. Xian Jialua was only providing him with information. If he wanted the blissful demon palace to be his fighter, how could it be that easy? So Ming Xuanyu put on a troubled expression and said, Brother Xian, to be honest, I also want to do it. But right now, my branch palace is a bit understaffed. Among the several branches of the blissful demon palace, my branch palace is a very difficult job. We need to collect ferocious beasts and capture the barbarians. So don't be fooled by the number of people in my branch palace. In fact, there aren't many people here. If I send people to help you, what will happen to my task here? Xian Jialua frowned and inwardly cursed Ming Xuanyu for being too greedy. After thinking for a while, Xian Jialua took out a bone from his spatial box. The bone was the size of an arm, but it looked like a finger bone. It was pitch black and emitted a ferocious aura. Ming Xuanyu's eyes immediately revealed a look of surprise. This is the finger bone of a black demon ape? Xian Jialua nodded. It's the black demon ape's finger bone. When the Sanskrit church first arrived in the western regions, We dispatched a large number of experts to exterminate this beast. Even a martial immortal expert died. Originally, we wanted to subdue this beast, but we didn't expect it to be so ferocious. Left with no choice, we could only use our full strength to kill it. After so many years, most of the materials on this black demon ape have been used up. This phalanx is the only thing I have left. Brother Ming, bring him back to the Blissful Devil Palace's headquarters and report to them. Have the others surround and kill Chu Xiao. Is that enough? Ming Xuanyu put away the finger bone of the black demonic ape, and couldn't help but reveal a smile on his gloomy face. Yes, of course it's enough. However, Brother Xian, I'll say it again. If you want me to fight alone, then it doesn't matter. But if you want to borrow the power of my blissful demon palace, you can't cross the border. Overstepping one's boundaries is a huge taboo. My blissful devil palace has never thought of becoming enemies with those big sects of the eastern region. Xian Jialua said in a deep voice, that's easy. I've said it before. I'm not asking you to go to Kangwu County. Make your move in the Dilua mountain range in the southern barbaric lands. That place can't be considered as the Imperial Sky Pavilion's territory, right? Then how are you going to lure him to the southern barbaric land? It's very simple. Isn't the Black Civ tribe under their control? Just send people to exterminate the Black Civ tribe. Remember, there's no need to be too ruthless. It's fine as long as they feel the threat of extermination. At that time, they'll naturally be lured over. Ming Xuanyu waved his hand and said, I'm familiar with that. I guarantee that I'll handle it properly. As he spoke, Ming Xuanyu raised the cup of sticky blood and offered it to Xian Jialua. Speaking of which, Brother Xian, are you sure you don't want a cup? It's very nourishing. Xian Jialua had a cold expression. I'm very strong. I don't need nourishment. In Kangwu County, during this period of time, Chu Xiao didn't go into closed-door training. Instead, he instructed the crowd to set up defenses and gather information regarding Xian Jialua. Although Xian Jialua didn't reveal his name, his strength of half-step martial immortal and his extremely eye-catching cultivation technique were enough to prove his identity. Sanskrit sect, Vishnu Palace, Sun God Palace's Palace Master Xian Jialua. He was an expert half-step martial immortal and the successor of the Vishnu Palace's Palace Master. In fact, once he stepped into the martial immortal realm, the previous Palace Master would immediately step down. Xian Jialua's status was clearly much higher than Moriha's. Thus, even if Chu Xiao knew that the Sanskrit sect wouldn't launch a large-scale attack, Chu Xiao still wouldn't be able to handle two experts of such caliber. As for Tianhun, Chu Xiao didn't tell him about this matter. Being imprisoned in the spiritual cloud realm, Tianhun couldn't do anything apart from his head. Even if Chu Xiao exhausted the power of his primordial spirit, he would only be able to ask Tianhun some questions regarding cultivation. As for asking Tianhun for advice, Chu Xiao never thought about that. He believed in his own abilities. Furthermore, he didn't think that Tianhun was stronger than him. Tianhun wasn't Dugu Weiwei. He had inherited Dugu Weiwei's memory from 500 years ago. Thus, even if he walked the same path as Dugu Weiwei 500 years ago, he might have the strength of Dugu Weiwei, but he wouldn't have the means of Dugu Weiwei. Chu Xiao had fought his way up from the mortal world. Obviously, he was better at this kind of thing. Just as Chu Xiao had arranged everything, Kecha sent news that He Luo tribe was in trouble. Hearing this news, Chu Xiao suddenly frowned. Previously, he had told He Jie and the others that accumulating strength should be done step by step. If he was too aggressive, it would easily cause the whole southern barbarian tribe to target him. Could it be that He Jie was too impatient for success, so he caused a siege? He Luo tribe was the key to Chu Xiao's plan in the southern barbarian land. Unless he had the strength to deal with all the southern barbarian tribes in the Dilua mountain range, he had to use He Luo tribe. Therefore, when he heard that He Luo tribe was in trouble, he immediately went to the southern barbarian land. After arriving at He Luo tribe, Chu Xiao discovered that He Jie and the others were in a worse state than he had imagined. He Jie's bones were all broken, and his face was pale. He had been seriously injured. Green Jade's face was also extremely pale. Although she wasn't injured, her aura was extremely weak. It was obvious that her spirit had been injured. What's going on? Which tribe injured you so badly? Chu Xiu asked with a frown. He Jie was so injured that he couldn't speak. Green Jade's aura was weak as she said. It's the foreigners from the south. Green Jade obviously didn't recognize the people from the blissful demon palace. Since it wasn't the foreigners from the east, it must be from the south. Kecha said, Sir, it's the people from the blissful demon palace. The blissful demon palace? Chu Xiu frowned. He had come across the ruins of the blissful demon palace in the lower world. He only had two impressions of this sect. One was that they were stubborn, and the other was that they were evil. In fact, this was indeed the case. The blissful demon palace didn't have a good reputation among the Daoyuotian people. The main reason was that they liked to research all sorts of strange and evil things. Therefore, they were hated by all the Daoyuotian people. The blissful demon palace is in the southern territory. Why would they come here and attack the Heiluo tribe? Kecha explained. The blissful demon palace likes to research all sorts of evil techniques. Some of them even use living people as experiments. They're purely tired of living if they attack the large sections. Even if they attack some independent cultivators or small sects without any foundation, their reputation will be affected, or they will be warned. Therefore, they can only target the barbarians. Near the southern territory, the blissful demon palace even specially built a branch to capture the barbarians and ferocious beasts in the Dilua mountain range. Perhaps because they've been capturing them for too long, the barbarians near the southern territory have become a little vigilant. Therefore, they came to the mountain range near the eastern territory to capture them. Chu Xiu nodded. He suddenly asked, Did the blissful demon palace try to kill you? Who was the one who did it? Green Jade shook her head and said, No, they didn't. They seem to want to capture us alive. The patriarch was already injured to this extent, but they still didn't kill us. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to escape. The one who did it was just an ordinary heaven and earth mystic insight realm cultivator. He's far weaker than you, my lord. However, they have many things in their hands that can restrain our tribe. We've never come into contact with these things before. We were caught off guard and fell into their trap. Chu Xiu nodded. Although he still felt that something was wrong, everything made sense. It seemed like the other party had really come to capture them. As for Xi and Jialua, it wasn't that Chu Xiu was careless, but he had overlooked something. The Daoyuotian and the lower realm were different. Chu Xiu had been in the lower realm for so many years. The idea that the righteous and demonic paths couldn't coexist with each other had been carved into his bones. Not long ago, he had even destroyed 2 Buddhist sections. However, the Daoyuotian were different. The Buddhists and demonic paths didn't have such a strong antagonism. They belonged to 4 different regions. The Buddhists were in the western region, while the demonic paths were in the southern region. The grudges between the two sides weren't that big. Even with Dugu Weiwei's appearance, Dugu Weiwei's target was the entire Daoyuotian, not the righteous path. Even though the Sanskrit sex style was different from the heavenly treasure Shahs, it was still considered a branch of the Buddhist path. Chu Xiu would never have thought that this matter was actually a trap set up by Xi and Jialuo. Hence Chu Xiu said, For the time being, the Black Net tribe will withdraw their defenses. Leave it to me. Beside him, Kocha said, Are you going to make a move, my lord? As far as I know, the people from the blissful demon palace are all crazy people. They're not easy to deal with. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes. Even if they're not easy to deal with, we'll fight them. The Dilua mountain range is huge. If they want to go somewhere else, I can't stop them. But if they insist on causing trouble here, then don't blame me for being impolite. After giving Green Jade his orders, Chu Xiu sent Kocha back to report the situation. He himself headed to the place that Green Jade had mentioned, the place where the blissful demon palace were camped. In the gloomy mountain forest, powerful demonic energy drifted about. It was extremely conspicuous. Chu Xiu didn't need to look too hard to find it. However, before Chu Xiu could get close, he sensed that something was wrong. This mountain range was close to the eastern region, which was extremely far from the southern region. The blissful demon palace had captured so many barbarians, so they should know that the barbarians were extremely hostile towards them. Yet they were still so high profile. Weren't they afraid of being discovered and attacked by a group of barbarians? After all, these barbarian tribes were still very united when facing outsiders. Sensing that something was wrong, Chushio was just about to retreat when the blinding golden rays of the sun lit up. Xianjialua calmly walked out and said, "Chushio, you can't escape from my grasp." Chapter 1196. The moment he saw Xianjialua, Chushio knew that he had fallen into a trap. There was no vexation or remorse. Chushio rarely had such emotions. Counter soldiers with arms, water with an earthweir. If there was a problem, he would solve it. There was no medicine for regret in this world. Moreover, Xianjialua wasn't the only one who had appeared in front of Chushio. Mingxuanyu and 2 other Pure Bliss Demon Palace Mystic Illumination Realm experts were also here. The outermost group was a group of Pure Bliss Demon Palace disciples, setting up a formation from afar. They were too weak. If they approached, they would be detected by Chushio. Moreover, they were afraid of suffering too many casualties. Therefore, they could only set up a formation to intercept them from afar. Chushio narrowed his eyes. Xianjialua, what are you trying to do? I've already said that I don't know any Moriha. Why do you insist on pestering me? You don't know Moriha? Then where did the illusion on your body come from? Don't tell me that it was passed down by your ancestors. There aren't that many coincidences in this world. Xianjialua sneered. Chushio, if you really have a clear conscience, then follow me back to the Sanskrit sect. My Vishnu Palace has a secret technique to probe one's mind. After proving that you're innocent, I will personally apologize to you. Otherwise, if you resist, it means that you have a guilty conscience. That means that there's something fishy going on. Chushio snorted. What a joke. I'm the Imperial Sky Pavilion's Kangwu County Governor and primeval successor. You want to probe my mind just because you say so? That's a complete humiliation. Xianjialua, you want to attack me just because of a groundless matter? Aren't you afraid that the Imperial Sky Pavilion and my master will blame you? Xianjialua sneered. Afraid? If I was afraid, I wouldn't have attacked you before. Cut the crap. Chushio, since you're unwilling to surrender, don't blame me for being impolite. Attack. With that, Xianjialua waved his hand, ordering Mingxuanyu and the others to charge forward. If Xianjialua came alone, Chushio wouldn't be able to defeat him, but he was confident that he could block him. However, now that Mingxuanyu had joined the fray, as well as 2 heaven and earth profound insight cultivators, Chushio was truly unable to hold them off. Therefore, in that instant, the pure demonic aura around Chushio's body swirled and frantically devoured the surrounding chi of heaven and earth. With the use of the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth, Chushio's body began to expand continuously. A strong aura suddenly descended like a demon god. Divine ability. Divine ability. Xianjialua and Mingxuanyu almost simultaneously spat out these 2 words. The 2 of them were both martial artists from the peak schools of the Jianghu. They were also existences with hopes of reaching the martial immortal realm. Naturally, they would not be unfamiliar with divine abilities. However, that was something that they had yet to grasp. Only after reaching the martial immortal realm would they dare to attempt to grasp it. And now, Chushio had openly used a divine ability right before their eyes. This was an enormous blow to them. Furthermore, as Chushio unleashed the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth, he also turned his gaze towards Mingxuanyu and the other Bliss Demon Palace cultivators. His eyes flickered with dense killing intent. Seeing that, Mingxuanyu immediately shouted, "Retreat! Retreat!" At that moment, he was cursing in his heart. I'm clearly here to help. The one who wants to capture you is Xianjialua. Why are you attacking me? Although Mingxuanyu had fought with many people and seen divine abilities, he had never faced a divine ability before. He did not know what sort of might a divine ability from a heaven and earth profound insight cultivator would possess. However, it was clear that it would not be weak. He had only come to help. He did not want to lose his life. Even if he were to be injured, it would not be worth it. However, at that moment, Chushio's figure rapidly shrunk. The natural energy that he had frantically absorbed dispersed in an instant. transforming into an extremely powerful explosive force. In an instant, Chu Xiu's figure was already several hundred zhang away. In that instant, Ming Xuanyu's expression darkened. I've been tricked. I've actually been tricked. Facing two peak heaven and earth profound insight cultivators, one of whom was a half-step martial immortal, Chu Xiu would have to be insane to fight them head-on. The might of the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth, or the clear sky illuminating shadow, was indeed astonishing. However, even a slightly weaker lawful embodiment of heaven and earth would threaten Chu Xiu's source energy if used for too long. Thus, even if Chu Xiu were to risk his life and kill one of them, he would still suffer a loss. What else could he do but run? Xian Jialuo did not retreat in fear. As he chased after Chu Xiu, he shouted angrily at Ming Xuanyu. Why are you running? Ming Xuanyu snorted coldly, but did not say a word. That was a divine ability, and it was aimed at you. If you were in my shoes, would you not run? At that moment, the blissful demon palace cultivators in the distance had already activated their array, blocking in front of Chu Xiu. However, in the next instant, Chu Xiu's god domain opened up around him. Within the misty domain, yin and yang were in a mess, and the five elements were reversed. Everything was distorted. The radiance of the array was distorted and disappeared in the domain. Even though the blissful demon palace cultivators were experts at the true fire spirit refinement realm, once they were pulled into the domain, their bodies began to distort in a strange manner. Even though they frantically used their astral energy, it was of no use. After the astral energy left their bodies, it was immediately melted and torn apart. Their entire bodies were torn into a bloody mist in the domain. No one had ever seen such a strange domain before. Ming Xuanyu shouted from behind. Retreat! Hurry and retreat! These people were all elites under his command. Xian Jialuo's fingerbone was not enough to exchange for their lives. In fact, even without Ming Xuanyu's words, the blissful demon palace cultivators also began to retreat frantically. No one was willing to throw away their lives like that. Xian Jialuo cursed them inwardly for being useless. However, this group of people had helped him delay Chu Xiu for about a breath's time. One breath of time was more than enough. Behind Xian Jialuo, a large sun rose into the sky, and a strong fiery light condensed in his hand, turning into a longbow. In that instant, all the surrounding spiritual energy frantically surged into his longbow, as if it was fuel. With a rumble, raging flames soared into the sky. Powerful power poured into the longbow. As Xian Jialuo's arrow shot out, it was as if the great sun had fallen. Wherever the arrow passed, the trees and forests were instantly burned to ashes. The air was distorted, and the earth and stones under their feet melted like magma erupting. Chu Xiu's expression changed abruptly. Was this the power of a half-step martial immortal? No wonder everyone said that Xian Jialuo would definitely become a martial immortal. With his current power, it was only a matter of time before he became a martial immortal. Chu Xiu turned around and formed hand seals. His domain spread out. The misty domain enveloped the arrow, constantly distorting its power. However, the power of the arrow was too strong. Even if Chu Xiu's domain could distort everything, it could only distort and tear apart the outer layer of flames. The power within was still powerful. But at this moment, Chu Xiu's hand seals had already been completed. In an instant, a series of ghostly wails and howls resounded in the domain. The space in midair was torn apart, and a terrifying demonic shadow reached out and grabbed the arrow. It was as if it wanted to drag the arrow into an endless gloomy land of death. At that moment, Singular formed a seal with his hand. His body had already turned into the scorching light of the sun. His body seemed to have some kind of connection with the arrow. Almost in an instant, he appeared in front of the scorching arrow. Xian Jialuo's hand seals descended, and a blazing light blossomed around him. Layers of mystical Sanskrit enveloped him. In the next instant, the great sun descended. Blinding light rose and a scorching aura tore and burned everything. It was as if a volcano had erupted on the ground. A huge crater was formed from the scorching heat. Within the crater, there were even black flowing crystals formed from the melted earth. However, there was no sign of Chu Xiu. There was not even a corpse. Damn it! You really know Moriha's illusion technique. Exaiangelo reacted in an instant. The power of the Great Compassion Mantra should have been prepared by Chu Xiu long ago. The one who formed the hand seals slowly at the end was not Chu Xiu at all. It was so natural that he could not see any flaws. Other than Moriha's illusion technique, he could not think of a second Daoyuotian technique that could turn illusions into reality. At this time, Ming Xuanyu also came over with his men. He asked, "You didn't catch him?" Exaiangelo didn't answer him. Instead, he coldly snorted and questioned. "Brother Ming, I gave you the information and the items so that you could help, not to watch the show. Why did you run away just now?" Although Ming Xuanyu was a little embarrassed, he still retorted confidently, "That was a divine ability. If you were targeted by a divine ability, would you run? Besides, I asked you about this Chu Xiu before. You didn't say that he knew a divine ability." Exaiangelo was also speechless. He himself did not know, so how could he tell him? However, this was not the Western territory, nor was it the Sanskrit religion. The only force he could use was the blissful demon palace. Therefore, he could only suppress his anger and said, "The monk can run, but the temple can't. As long as this Chu Xiu is still in Kangwu County, he will come out." "What are you going to do?" Ming Xuanyu asked. Exaiangelo said coldly, "The Black Net tribe is in his hands." He also built a stronghold in the southern barbaric land, which is guarded by the Black Net tribe. It seems that he has some plans in the entire southern barbaric land. Attack his stronghold. If we can't take it down, then surround it until he shows up, or until he abandons his base. Ming Xuanyu shrugged and did not express any opinion. In any case, he was here to be a hired thug, so of course, everything would be decided by Exaiangelo. However, he still said, "Brother Exain, let me say this in advance. This place is very close to Kangwu County. If the Eastern Territory's big sects like High Heaven sect come, I will have to withdraw with my men. It's not worth offending the Eastern Territory's martial world for such a small matter." "Don't worry, I know what I'm doing." Exaiangelo said this, but he felt a little disdainful towards Ming Xuanyu. The other party was a little too cautious. The martial Tao was like being a person. Without a brave and aggressive heart, how could one continue to move forward? In the past, his cultivation was similar to Ming Xuanyu's, but now he was already half a step into the martial immortal realm, while the other party was only at the peak of the heaven and earth profound insight realm. This was the gap between them. Chapter 1197. As Chu Xiu escaped from the encirclement, his complexion was slightly pale. He didn't use too much of his strength, but his spirit power was greatly exhausted. Exaiangelo was a half-step martial immortal. If he didn't push his spirit power to its peak, he wouldn't be able to hide from Exaiangelo. Furthermore, at a time like this, even if he were to cast an illusion in front of Exaiangelo, it wouldn't matter if Exaiangelo saw it. Exaiangelo was extremely stubborn and overbearing. As long as he was certain that Chu Xiu was related to Moriha, he must get a result. Furthermore, the result must be determined by him. Thus, no matter how many false testimonies Chu Xiu gave, unless Exaiangelo personally verified Chu Xiu's memories, he wouldn't believe him. How troublesome. Chu Xiu let out a long sigh. After returning to the Black Luo tribe, he immediately moved the people of the Black Luo tribe to the stronghold he established in the southern barbaric land. At the same time, he notified Wei Shuya and Shang Tianliang to come and stand guard there. Since Exaiangelo knew of the relationship between him and the Black Luo tribe, it meant that Exaiangelo would definitely make an issue out of the Black Luo tribe. The Black Luo tribe was something that he had painstakingly nurtured. They were loyal and trusted fighters. He couldn't let them die just like that. When Shang Tianliang, Wei Shuya, and the others arrived and received the news, they also felt that it was very troublesome. Before the absolute power of the blissful demon palace's branch palace and Exaiangelo, who was a half-step martial immortal, it was clear that playing petty tricks would be useless. Shang Tianliang thought for a moment and said, "You're a member of the Imperial Sky Pavilion now. Isn't the Pavilion Master a martial immortal? Let him deal with this." Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "It's not that simple. Right now, The Imperial Sky Pavilion only has a single martial immortal. If he leaves the Imperial Sky Pavilion, there'll be no one to stand guard there. If the Cold River City were to attack us, who would stop them? Putting aside the fact that I'm only a guest of Cold River City, even if Lu Sanjin were to encounter such a crisis, the Imperial Sky Pavilion wouldn't care at all. While Chu Xiu was pondering, Mei Qinglian also walked over at this time. She handed over a pile of information with a solemn expression and said, "This is troublesome. People from the Blissful Devil Palace have been spotted all around the base. It seems like they're planning to surround us and kill us here." Chu Xiu knocked his head, feeling a little headache. In the face of such absolute power, he couldn't think of any good methods. Fortunately, this base's array formation was even more powerful than the county governor Manners. After all, this place was the passageway between the two worlds, and there were many disciples of the Kunlun devil cult cultivating in it. Naturally, Chu Xiu had to be extremely cautious and directly operated this stronghold as the headquarters of the Kunlun devil cult. However, it wasn't enough to just be surrounded by people. Moreover, it was impossible for him to activate the array formation for a long period of time. Once the array formation was activated, it would consume a lot of resources. At this time, Chu Xiu subconsciously flipped through the information that Mei Qinglian handed him. Apart from information about the Blissful Devil Palace, there was also information about the lower realm. In fact, there would be information about the lower realm sent to him every once in a while. This information should have been sent to him before he went to the Black Luo tribe. In the end, because Chu Xiu suddenly went to the Black Luo tribe, he was delayed and didn't see this information. Chu Xiu glanced at it. There was a piece of information that was extremely eye-catching. A conflict broke out between the West Chu World Alliance and the Windcloud Sword Tomb. Chen Qingdi severely injured the Windcloud Sword Tomb's mystic and lightning realm powerhouse, Sword Venerable Zhongli Mu, with one punch. Chu Xiu pointed at the information and said, "When did this happen? What exactly happened?" Mei Qinglian glanced at the information above and said, "Oh, it's this. It happened a few days ago. The World Alliance is actually quite law-abiding. It has always been that we don't offend others if they don't offend us. However, a few days ago, Chen Qingdi's disciple, Xie Xiaolu, had some conflict with a younger generation disciple of the Windcloud Sword Tomb who entered the Longhu list." "Are you sure it's Xie Xiaolu?" Although Chu Xiu hadn't seen Xie Xiaolu for a long time, he still knew Xie Xiaolu very well. This person was a very proud person. The current Xie Xiaolu should be at the real pellet state. He no longer belonged to the youngest generation of martial artists. The Longhu list had been updated for 2 generations. What conflict could he have with the younger generation martial artists? He should be disdainful of bullying the younger generation. It seems that the younger generation martial artist of the Windcloud Sword Tomb spoke ill of the World Alliance, and he was punished by Xie Xiaolu. Later his master came, and he was also defeated by Xie Xiaolu. But in the end he provoked an elder of the Windcloud Sword Tomb, who seriously injured Xie Xiaolu. Then he angered Chen Qingdi, who personally went to the Windcloud Sword Tomb to demand an explanation. Chu Xiu nodded. This was in line with Chen Qingdi's character. Normally, Emperor Chen Qing seemed to be very strict with Xie Xiaolu, looking down on this person, looking down on that person. Basically, he mainly dealt a blow to Xie Xiaolu, giving him a setback education. But in fact, Chen Qingdi was still very protective of his disciples. "Only I can beat my disciple. If others dare to move, they will die." How many punches did Chen Qingdi use to defeat Zhongli Mu? Mei Qinglian's expression was a little strange. 2 punches to be precise, it was 1 punch. The first punch shattered the Windcloud Sword Tomb's sect protection formation, and it directly alarmed Zhongli Mu. Chen Qingdi directly said, "You beat the younger one, and the older one came. I'll be more direct, and beat the oldest one. I don't believe that the dead of the Windcloud Sword Tomb will climb out of their graves to find trouble with me." After saying that, Chen Qingdi only used 1 punch, and Zhongli Mu vomited blood. After hearing Mei Qinglian's words, Chu Xiu was shocked, and everyone else present also had the same reaction. Sword Venerable Zhongli Mu, the personal disciple of the Sword Sovereign Shen Kangwu 500 years ago, was in existence at the peak of the heaven and earth profound understanding realm. When he became famous in the pugilistic world, Wei Shuya could only be considered a junior who had just entered the pugilistic world. This person had not appeared for 100 years, and the last time he appeared was when Chu Xiu rebuilt the Kunlun devil cult. He joined hands with the righteous martial world to threaten Chu Xiu. At that time, although Zhongli Mu did not make a move, but Chu Xiu and the others could be sure that the other party definitely had a certain level of combat power, and was definitely not old to the point that he could not move. But now he was seriously injured by Chen Qingdi with one punch. What level of cultivation did Chen Qingdi reach? Chu Xiu touched his chin. It seemed that Chen Qingdi should have broken through again. In the whole pugilistic world, there were actually only two people who practiced the true fire body refining. One was Chu Xiu and the other was Chen Qingdi. Chu Xiu was only a subsidiary, and for him, the true fire body refining was only a method to increase combat power and physical strength. Chen Qingdi was even more extreme. He directly gave up the normal path of cultivation and took the path of body refining. In short, Chen Qingdi was no longer considered to be in the true fire spirit refining realm. Even if he broke through, he would not be in the mysterious realm of heaven and earth, nor would he have a domain, but he had a combat power that could match it. If they were to talk about resemblances, then Emperor Chen Qingdi was rather similar to the berserkers from the celestial absolute heaven. However, he was 100 or even 1,000 times more powerful than them. That was because the path he had taken was a path without a path. He had to overcome all obstacles on his own. Chu Xiu suddenly said at this time, "Now that we are trapped here, as long as we move, Xi and Jialua and the others will definitely make a move. If we don't repel them, my previous arrangements in the southern barbaric land will be in vain. I want to go to the lower realm to find support. What do you think?" Everyone present immediately reacted to who Chu Xiu was looking for. "Chen Qingdi?" Chu Xiu nodded. Wei Shuya said in a deep voice, "It's not impossible to find Chen Qingdi, but first you have to determine whether Chen Qingdi can be trusted. Also, are you sure that Chen Qingdi can deal with that Xi and Jialua?" Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, "For so many years, you should have heard about Chen Qingdi. Chen Qingdi may be simple and crude, and his actions are also overbearing, but he has never done anything that goes against faith. At least in terms of morality, what Chen Qingdi does is better than most of the so-called righteous people. Of course, this is just my opinion. Whether Chen Qingdi can be trusted, to be honest, I don't have absolute confidence, but Xie Xiaolu can be trusted. For his disciple, I think he will not fall out with me. I have 80% confidence in this matter." In fact, with Chu Xiu's character, he wants to have 99% confidence in anything. The last point is up to the will of the heavens. But now it has to be said that Xi and Jialua did not attack Kangwu County, but besieged Chu Xiu's stronghold in the south. He accidentally hit Chu Xiu's Achilles heel. If Xi and Jialua went to Kangwu County, Chu Xiu might use the southern region's invasion of the eastern region as an excuse to do something, or he might not even care about the governor's office. But Chu Xiu couldn't give up the stronghold in the south no matter what. So let alone 80% confidence, even if it was only 50%, Chu Xiu would still do it. Knocking on the table, Chu Xiu continued, "There is also Chen Qingdi's strength. I feel that he is stronger than you think. This cultivation method of true fire body refinement is a path that no one has ever taken before, so don't bring it into the normal cultivation method. In the case of Chen Qingdi's normal true fire spirit refinement, 90% of true fire spirit refinement martial artists can't even take one punch from him. Even Elysium divine generals can't take more than a few punches from him. Now that he has broken through, it is not the heaven and earth mysterious realm. However, a heaven and earth mysterious realm powerhouse who was once famous in the pugilistic world couldn't even take one punch from him. You can imagine this power. I have already fought with Xi and Jialua, and I can feel his strength. When I go to invite Chen Qingdi, I will also test his strength. If he really has the strength to fight with Xi and Jialua, then I will say these things." Wei Shuya and the others nodded. As long as Chu Xiu was confident, it was fine. The Kunlun devil cult, or rather Chu Xiu's plan, had always been like this. Sometimes, when Chu Xiu proposed a very bold plan, Although they didn't agree with it, they would fully cooperate with it and execute it. They thought that what they agreed with and trusted was Chu Xiu himself, and not the crazy plan. They believed that no matter how bold the plan was, in Chu Xiu's hands, there was a possibility of success. Chapter 1198. Chu Xiu had already decided to go down to the lower realm and ask Chen Qingdi for help. However, he had other plans for the Daluotian side. Chen Qingdi could deal with Xian Jialua, but the people from the blissful demon palace had to be defeated as well. In fact, Chu Xiu wasn't weak in the Daluotian side. The elites of the Kunlun devil cult were almost all in the Daluotian side. If they were all released, they wouldn't be afraid of a branch of the blissful demon palace. However, these were his people, his trusted subordinates that he had painstakingly nurtured. It would be a waste if they were sacrificed at this time. Therefore, Chu Xiu could only think of other ways. Since this was the southern barbarian land, the matter would fall on the heads of the southern barbarian tribes. Chu Xiu found Green Jade and said to her, "The people from the blissful demon palace once captured the warriors of the tribes near the southern region, and conducted all kinds of evil experiments. However, because you barbarians rarely communicate with each other, the barbarian tribes near the eastern region don't know about this. Now, I want you to send someone to inform the barbarian tribes and ask them to join forces to resist the blissful demon palace. However, this matter is very dangerous. We are surrounded by warriors from the blissful demon palace. Although they are mainly monitoring us warriors, barbarians don't have vital energy and won't be easily discovered. There is still a certain degree of risk. Who do you think is qualified to handle this matter?" If this happened in the Daluotian sects, they would definitely first carefully verify the matter to see if it was true. Then they would think about all kinds of things, shirk responsibility, and even oppose in secret. They would have to wait until the Daluotian side clearly explained the pros and cons, and even offered sufficient benefits before they would be willing to join forces and attack. However, this matter was much simpler when it came to the barbarians. There weren't so many tricks. As long as the people from the Black Luo tribe went to the tribes and told them about this matter, and swore on their ancestors and gods, the other side would definitely believe them. The barbarian tribes were almost all straightforward people and wouldn't lie. In addition, they swore on their ancestors and gods, who were more important than their own lives. This made it even more impossible for it to be fake. Green Jade nodded and said, "Don't worry, Sir Divine Envoy. The warriors of the Black Civ tribe aren't afraid of death. I'm just afraid that we won't be able to complete the mission that Sir Divine Envoy has given us. I'll go make arrangements right away. The more people we have, the higher the chances of us breaking out of the encirclement." Chu Xiu nodded. Green Jade would handle such a small matter. After saying that, Chu Xiu immediately went to the lower realm. At this time, outside Chu Xiu's stronghold, the people from the blissful demon palace had already surrounded him. Ming Xuanyu looked at the stronghold in front of him, which was protected by layers of formations, and asked, "Are you going to storm it? Let me make this clear. If we storm it, the power of this formation isn't weak. You go first, and I'll make my move after breaking the formation. I can't let the disciples of the blissful demon palace throw away their lives." Xian Jialua snorted coldly and said, "Don't worry, we won't storm it for the time being. We'll just wear them out. I don't believe that they can maintain such a powerful formation all the time. Even the headquarters of the Imperial Sky Pavilion wouldn't be so extravagant." Although that was what Xian Jialua said, he was puzzled. He had always felt that this Chu Xiu was a little strange. Not only was he strange, but the things he did were also very strange. For example, this formation in front of him. He really couldn't understand what Chu Xiu was thinking. He didn't even make such a big formation for the county governor's mansion in Kangwu County. Instead, he built such a big stronghold in this desolate and uninhabited land of the southern barbarians, and set up so many powerful formations. What was he trying to do? Could it be that the Imperial Sky Pavilion was preparing to attack the southern barbarians? Of course, Xian Jialua just casually thought about these things and didn't delve into it. For the current him, he only wanted to capture Chu Xiu and interrogate him about the whereabouts of Moriha. Whether he was dead or alive, a dignified palace master of the Sanskrit sect had to give him an explanation, especially when the other party was the palace master of his own Vishnu palace. Lower Realm, West Chu, Heaven Alliance. The Heaven Alliance wasn't in the prefecture of West Chu, but in a huge valley plain. Standing in front of the Heaven Alliance, Chu Xiu suddenly felt that the ancestors of Chenqing Di and High Firmament City would definitely have a common language. Their architectural styles were exactly the same. They were all big and incomparably magnificent, especially the palace where Chenqing Di was. It was obviously only one floor, but the foundation was more than 10 feet high. It was as if he liked to stand on a high place and look down. The current Chu Xiu could be said to have truly achieved the status where everyone in the world didn't know him. Even if he didn't have a relationship with Xie Xiaolu, he was still invited into the Heaven Alliance politely. After Xie Xiaolu heard the news, he immediately came out to greet Chu Xiu. When he was young, his temperament was relatively cold and he didn't talk much. These years, perhaps because he started to gradually take over the affairs of the Heaven Alliance, and because he hadn't seen his old friend Chu Xiu for a long time, he was very cordial. Brother Chu, actually, when I heard that you came back, I wanted to go to Kunlun Mountain to visit you. But unfortunately, the position of my Heaven Alliance is special. If I go, it won't be good. The Heaven Alliance was not a righteous path or a demonic path. When Chu Xiu came back, a group of people came to persuade Chu Xiu to repent. But in the end, he came to talk about the old days. It was indeed very awkward. You and I don't need to explain these things. In this world of big battles, actually, it's not easy for the Heaven Alliance to be able to remain neutral. Xie Xiaolu sighed and said, yes, it's not easy. Previously, Xie Xiaolu didn't participate in the messy affairs of the Heaven Alliance, so he didn't have such deep feelings. Only when Xie Xiaolu started to truly participate in the management of the Heaven Alliance did he know how difficult it was. The martial world is divided into righteous and demonic paths. Since the Heaven Alliance doesn't occupy either side, it's possible that both sides will come to find trouble with you. Therefore, the reason why the Heaven Alliance was able to last until now was because of Chenqing Di's powerful strength. Oh right, Brother Xie, is Alliance Leader Chen in the Heaven Alliance? Xie Xiaolu nodded and said, Master is inside, I'll bring you to see him. In fact, Chu Xiu hasn't seen Chenqing Di for a long time. Ever since the war between righteous and demonic paths started, the righteous and demonic paths started to fight each other. Chenqing Di led the Heaven Alliance to maintain a neutral position. Because of his strength, no one was bored enough to provoke him. Therefore, Chenqing Di spent most of his time cultivating, and hasn't appeared in the martial world for a long time. In fact, many of the Heaven Alliance's matters were managed by Xie Xiaolu. Of course, sometimes Chenqing Di would bring Xie Xiaolu to watch the show, just like when Chu Xiu destroyed the Sabodhi monastery. However, Chenqing Di only watched and didn't participate. He was very low-key. Now that he saw Chenqing Di, Chu Xiu could feel that Chenqing Di had indeed broken through. His physical strength had even reached a level that Chu Xiu couldn't comprehend. Chenqing Di's body now contained an explosive power. The power in every muscle he exposed shocked Chu Xiu. At this moment, Chu Xiu felt like he was looking at a walking fierce beast in human form. Chenqing Di sat on a chair and laughed, saying, Great sect leader Chu, why do you have time to come to my Heaven Alliance? You don't come here for no reason. You definitely didn't come here to reminisce. Tell me what's the matter. Chu Xiu smiled and said, Alliance Leader Chen, you're making fun of me. Brother Xie and I are brothers. In front of Alliance Leader Chen, I don't dare to call myself sect leader. However, I heard that Alliance Leader Chen has stepped into a new realm. It just so happens that I've cultivated the true fire body refinement technique before. Therefore, I would like to ask Alliance Leader Chen for some guidance. A faint smile appeared on Chenqing Di's face. Oh, you want to spar with me? Sure. Previously, when I saw you fight with Rama, you used all kinds of techniques. It made me very envious. Today, I can see it for myself. If an ordinary junior had asked Chenqing Di for guidance, Chenqing Di would have directly punched him. Guidance, your grandma. You don't deserve it. However, Chu Xiu was different. After destroying the North and South Buddhist sects, Chu Xiu was now a supreme figure in the pugilistic world. At the very least, his fame was greater than Chen Qingdi's. As the two of them spoke, they walked towards the martial arts arena behind the Heaven Alliance. Xie Xiaolu was dumbfounded as he followed behind the two of them. Until now, he still couldn't figure out what was going on between the two of them. They only exchanged a few words. Why did they start fighting? On the martial arts arena, Chen Qingdi said indifferently, "Get ready. My punch isn't that easy to receive." Chu Xiu nodded. Chen Qingdi didn't stand on ceremony. In the next moment, his fist had already smashed down. When the fist was unleashed, the wind and clouds dispersed. In front of that fist, all the power vanished into thin air. It wasn't because this fist had some special ability, but because under such pure power, even the heaven and earth Yuan Qi couldn't withstand such a powerful pressure. The array on the martial arts arena had just lit up when it was extinguished. Wherever the fist passed, the earth and rocks were sent flying, as if an earth dragon was flipping over. Xie Xiaolu, who was watching from afar, twitched his mouth. Master, did he forget that this was his own home? When Chen Qingdi punched out, Chu Xiu already knew Chen Qingdi's true strength. This was a punch of physical strength to the extreme. Even Lu Fengxian's physical strength after erupting with unparalleled strength couldn't compare to the power of Chen Qingdi's punch. Breaking through the array, a biting cold saber light tore through the void. At the same time, the god domain spread out. The 5 elements and yin and yang distorted, tearing apart all the power. However, it couldn't distort the body that was as strong as a fierce beast. A thunderous sound rang out. Chen Qingdi's punch not only tore apart Chu Xiu's domain, but also completely shattered his saber light. In the next moment, heaven's cry blood rain fell from the sky. The demon god's giant hand reached out and grabbed Chen Qingdi's fist. In an instant, the two forces were in a deadlock. However, after 3 breaths of time, the demon god's giant hand began to crack. Fortunately, when the great compassion mantra dissipated, the power of Chen Qingdi's punch was finally exhausted. Just as he was about to punch again, Chu Xiu suddenly said, "Stop! I'm not fighting anymore." Chapter 1199. With just one punch, Chu Xiu more or less knew Chen Qingdi's strength. The path of true fire body refinement was countless times more difficult than normal martial arts cultivation, but once there was a breakthrough, it would also be countless times more powerful. Before Chen Qingdi broke through, he could practically kill a true fire spirit refinement expert with one punch. Now that he broke through, he could also kill a heaven and earth mysterious realm expert with one punch. This kind of battle strength seemed to not exist in the early and middle stages. As long as he broke through, he would be at the peak. At this moment, Chen Qingdi was a little depressed and said, "Kid, why aren't you fighting anymore? I know that you are still far from your peak strength. Last time, I fought with that old guy from Windcloud Sword Tomb, but it was very unpleasant. That old guy has a false reputation and he couldn't beat him, so he had to use the trump cards of Windcloud Sword Tomb. Boring, not satisfying." Chu Xiu smiled and said, "If Alliance Master Chen wants to satisfy himself, I can give you this opportunity. This time, I came to find Alliance Master Chen because I actually have a very important matter to tell you." Hearing Chu Xiu say this, Chen Qingdi's face also showed a touch of solemnity. "Oh, what is it?" Chen Qingdi started from scratch and built such a huge foundation of the World Alliance, so naturally, he was not a simple brute. Right now, Chu Xiu was the sect master of the Kunlun Devil cult, a person who ruled over the world. For him to specially come here to tell him an important matter, it could be imagined how important this matter was. Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "This matter is of great importance. Let's find an absolutely safe and hidden place to talk." Chen Qingdi waved his hand and brought Chu Xiu and Xie Xiaolu to a secret room, and said in a deep voice, "Can you say it now?" Chu Xiu nodded and said with a solemn expression, "This matter concerns a very big secret of mine. I came to tell you this because I have something that I need your help with, Alliance Master Chen. Furthermore, I believe in Brother Xie and Alliance Master Chen's character. Regardless of whether Alliance Leader Chen agrees to this or not, please don't spread this news." Chen Qingdi waved his hand and said, You don't have to worry about that. Let's not talk about your relationship with my family's brat. I, Chen Qingdi, am not the kind of person who talks too much. Chu Xiu nodded and said, Do you know where I went when I disappeared for a year? Xie Xiaolu couldn't help but ask, Where did he go? Chu Xiu said solemnly, He went to another world. After saying that, Chu Xiu told Chen Qingdi everything about the Daluotian. Apart from the core matters like Dugu Weiwei, he didn't hide anything else. After hearing that, Xie Xiaolu's jaw dropped. He had an expression of shock on his face. He was so shocked that he couldn't say anything. Even Chen Qingdi was unable to maintain his calm. He too had an expression of shock on his face. The existence of the Daluotian, another world. To a cultivator like Chen Qingdi who came from a humble background and did not know much about the ancient era, this came as a huge shock. Chu Xiu paused for a moment to allow the two of them to digest the information. Then he said, That's why I came here this time. I want to ask Alliance Master Chen to help me get out of this predicament and repel that half-step martial immortal from the Sanskrit school. At the same time, as a price, Alliance Master Chen and Brother Xie can freely travel between the Daluotian and the lower realms. Even the elites of the World Alliance can enter the Daluotian to train. However, they can't move about freely. You can only tell them that it's a mysterious realm, and they can only stay there to train. What do you think of this condition, Alliance Master Chen? After a long while, Chen Qingdi knocked on the table and said, Truth be told, you're actually trying to make me your fighter. However, I have no reason to refuse your condition. To Chen Qingdi, the origin energy of heaven and earth within the Daluotian was actually not very useful to him. True fire tempering one's body, not absorbing the origin energy of heaven and earth to accumulate power. Thus, it was not very useful to Chen Qingdi. However, to be able to fight against a half-step martial immortal was very tempting to the current Chen Qingdi. After making his breakthrough, Chen Qingdi actually possessed the strength to be ranked on the sovereign list. However, to be honest, there were not many in the lower realms who could fight against him. As for Chu Xiu, he was on the same side. Thus, he could only spar with him. The old celestial master had concealed his strength very well. Even when he fought against Yi Xiaonan back then, he did not use his full strength. However, the World Alliance did not have any conflicts with the Celestial Master Mansion. Why would he go to Longhu Mountain and fight the Celestial Master Mansion to the death? Yi Xiaonan was strong enough. However, he was in closed-door training. The only ones left were the two from the Heavenly Gate and the Sky of Freedom. Chen Qingdi knew that he would not be able to defeat those two. If he were to fight them, he would not be accumulating battle experience. According to Chu Xiu, there were many Daluotian cultivators who had reached the half-step martial immortal realm, or the peak of the profound opening realm. It would be enough for him to display his strength. Furthermore, the Daluotian was very useful to Xie Xiaolu and the other cultivators of the World Alliance. In the entire World Alliance, only Chen Qingdi walked the path of body tempering with true fire. Even Xie Xiaolu did not walk that path. Thus, the environment of the Daluotian was most definitely a treasure trove for them. After they were done, Chu Xiu immediately brought Chen Qingdi to the Daluotian. The instant they stepped into the Daluotian, Chen Qingdi and Xie Xiaolu could not help but be dumbfounded. They sighed in admiration at how powerful the spiritual energy of the Daluotian was. After they were done sighing, Chu Xiu brought the two of them out to meet Wei Shuya and the others. Chen Qingdi knew the people from the Kunlun devil cult. Especially Xie Xiaolu and Lu Fengxian, they were good friends. After a long while, Xie Xiaolu forced a smile and said, Right now, I feel sorry for those people from the righteous sections. He's still plotting against you, guarding against you and setting up a trap, but you've already started to fight in another world. This is simply unreasonable. From Xie Xiaolu's point of view, those people from the righteous sects in the lower realm were simply pitiful. They had secretly plotted all sorts of schemes, but in the end, Chu Xiu had no intention of playing along with them. Their starting points were already different, so how could they still play? Chen Qingdi waved his hand and said, All right, enough nonsense. Where is that guy you were talking about? Chu Xiu said in a low voice, He's just outside. After surrounding us for so many days, they're probably getting a little impatient. Now is the time to deal with them all at once. At this time, outside Chuxiu's stronghold, Xian Jialua and Ming Xuanyu were still guarding it. In fact, they were not impatient. Xian Jialua had time, and Ming Xuanyu had even more time after receiving the benefits. Originally, they were still waiting for Chuxiu's formation to run out of energy. In the end, who would have thought that the formation's light would dissipate in the next moment? Ming Xuanyu and Xian Jialua looked at each other. Was Chuxiu finally unable to bear it any longer, and wanted to fight with them? The two of them immediately led their people over to surround them. Seeing Chuxiu and the others walk out of the formation, Xian Jialua said coldly, "Chuxiu, are you prepared to surrender without a fight? Obediently return with me and tell me everything about Moriha. I won't touch your subordinates. But if you don't know how to appreciate kindness, let alone the people in your stronghold, you won't even be able to protect Kangwu County." However, at this time, Xian Jialua strangely discovered that Chuxiu's people did not seem to be afraid at all. When facing them, they seemed to have a card up their sleeve. This made Xian Jialua puzzled. Could it be that they had something to rely on? Chuxiu's side did not respond to Xian Jialua. Standing beside him, a rough-looking man pointed at Xian Jialua and said with an accent that made Xian Jialua feel very uncomfortable, "Are you talking about that shiny monk?" Xian Jialua was stunned. What the hell was a shiny monk? Just as he was about to say something, he saw Chuxiu nod. Following that, the burly man also nodded. "All right, then leave this guy to me." Xian Jialua was about to say that the other party was boasting shamelessly, but in the next moment, the burly man had already made his move. With a punch, the extreme strength of his physical body shook the void. Everything in front of Xian Jialua began to distort. This was a powerful sense of oppression brought about by absolute power. Xian Jialua's eyes suddenly widened. Where did this monster come from? Even the experts from the top sects of the southern region, the Battle God sect, could not possibly have this level of physical strength. He formed a seal with his hands and a great sun rose behind him. With a scorching power that could melt everything, it smashed towards Chunqing Di with a loud bang. Although Sanskrit was also considered a branch of Buddhism, in reality, the cultivation methods of Sanskrit were like Buddha but not Buddha, like devil but not devil, leaning towards evil and strange. Just look at Moriha's illusions and Chuxiu's world annihilation fire. However, only the cultivation method of Solar Divine Palace that Xian Jialua cultivated was open and aboveboard. It exerted the power of the sun to the extreme, and could be said to be fierce and imposing. However, in the face of Chunqing Di's powerful punch, he was the only one in the world. So what if it was the great sun? With one hand, he could pluck the moon and pluck the stars. Even if it was the sun, he could also shatter it with a single punch. With a loud bang, the scorching fireball was directly shattered by Chunqing Di's punch. The true sunfire that could smelt divine weapons smashed onto his body, but it could not even burn through his skin and flesh. Xian Jialua's expression changed. The Sanskrit Buddhist seal in his hands bloomed and blocked in front of him. However, in the next moment, he was sent flying hundreds of feet away by Chunqing Di's punch and smashed into the ground, creating a huge crater. At this time, Chuxiu was not idle either. The destruction formation in his hand slashed towards Ming Xuanyu with a sharp edge that seemed to tear the heavens and earth apart. This person was also in existence at the peak of the heaven and earth elemental enlightenment realm, so it was naturally up to him to deal with him. There were still 2 heaven and earth elemental enlightenment realm experts in Ming Xuanyu's Bliss Demon Palace branch. Wei Shuya and Shang Tianliang each faced one of them. Under Green Jade's orders, the members of Black Civ tribe roared and rushed towards the Bliss Demon Palace martial artists. Because He Jie was too heavily injured, he did not participate. At this moment, the two sides were already engaged in a fierce battle. Chapter 1200. Xian Jialua was still in a daze. This was because before he came to find Chuxiu, he had already obtained detailed information on Chuxiu from Linghu Immortal Mountain. He believed that he had a good understanding of Chuxiu. But now, an unfathomable fellow had suddenly appeared near Chuxiu's group, and sent him flying with a single punch. Anyone with this kind of power could not be a nameless figure even in the entire Daluotian world. Who was this person? Before Xianjialua could react, Chen Qingdi had already charged at him again. He glanced at the scorch mark on his fist and raised an eyebrow. These Daluotian fellows were indeed extraordinary. They had some real skills to be able to injure him, although it was not even a superficial wound. Another punch fell. The powerful fist intent to press the surrounding space and made a series of explosions. There was no change. It was such a simple punch, but it was also a punch that had reached the pinnacle of power. With a loud bang, the scorching power of the sun turned into an arrow and exploded right in front of Chen Qingdi. But he did not even try to block it. Instead, he punched again. The bow shattered, and Xianjialua was sent flying. Xianjialua was once again smashed into the ground, and even his internal organs were shaken. Damn it! Xianjialua formed a Buddhist seal with his hands, and the image of a Buddha appeared behind him. It had 3 faces and 4 arms, and it held the sun in its hands as it smashed down on Chen Qingdi's head. In an instant, the scorching light engulfed everything within 1,000 feet, so bright that it was difficult to keep one's eyes open. The earth could not withstand this powerful force, and sand and stones turned into lava. Xianjialua panted heavily. He did not believe that his opponent could remain unscathed under this kind of power. However, in the next moment, a figure walked out of the blazing flames and punched out again. The fist intent was even mixed with a strong fighting spirit. Ha ha ha. Interesting, satisfying. Chen Qingdi's body was scorched red by the scorching power, but this kind of solar true fire, which could melt gold and iron, could not melt his body, which had been tempered by true fire for countless years. Another punch landed, and Xianjialua was sent flying again. This time, he really could not hold on any longer, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. On Ming Xuanyu's side, Chu Xiu had also exchanged blows with him. The Bliss Demon Palace was a major demonic sect, and Chu Xiu had seen their ruins in the lower realm. Their techniques were inclined towards the sinister, and Ming Xuanyu was the same. He did not know what technique he cultivated, but when he opened his domain, a domain that was filled with sinister qi appeared. However, this domain did not have any destructive power. Instead, he condensed countless evil ghosts and placed them into the domain. When combined with the domain, it increased the power of the domain by 30%. Chu Xiu had never seen this kind of strange technique that could be created by combining one's own technique and domain. However, it did not matter what kind of sinister ghosts they were. When Chu Xiu opened his god's domain, the 5 elements and yin and yang were inverted and twisted. Everything within the range of his domain was twisted into nothingness. Chu Xiu found Ming Xuanyu's domain very strange, but Ming Xuanyu found Chu Xiu's domain even more strange. He had never seen such a domineering domain before. In the end, a small half of the ghosts that he had painstakingly cultivated were directly dissipated, and this made Ming Xuanyu grimace in pain. With a loud shout, Ming Xuanyu retracted his domain, and a pitch-black long blade appeared in his hand. The entire blade was as black as ink, and only the blade had a hint of scarlet. As the blade slashed down, it actually began to devour all the power in the world, even light. Everywhere that the blade passed through was like a pitch-black eternal night. It was extremely strange. However, in the next moment, the breaking formation in Chu Xiu's hand was also unsheathed. The entire sky instantly lit up, illuminated by the sharpness of Chu Xiu's blade. Wherever the blade pointed, an endless amount of sharpness descended. The powerful force directly sent Ming Xuanyu flying. Even his sinister long blade let out a mournful cry. His saber could indeed absorb any kind of true qi. However, Chu Xiu's ethereal slash and the saber will of the breaking formula had brought out its sharpness to the extreme. It did not contain any kind of strange power, so how could he absorb it? In the next moment, the long blade in Chu Xiu's hand directly slashed down toward the ground, and the earth destruction of the 7 extremities was unleashed. In an instant, the ground trembled as if an earth dragon was turning over. Ming Xuanyu felt that something was wrong. He wanted to soar into the sky, but it was already too late. On the cracked ground, countless astral blades wrapped around him, making him look extremely wretched. When he finally managed to break free from the entanglement of the blade aura, a ghostly murmur rang out from Ming Xuanyu's body. Heaven weeps, blood rain fell, and the space above his head was torn apart. The shadow of a demon stretched out half of its body and directly grabbed at him. Ming Xuanyu's expression finally changed. He formed a seal with his hands, and black mist rose around him, turning into a huge storm of demonic qi that swept out. There were even endless wails of evil spirits within it, fighting against the Great Compassion mantra. Ming Xuanyu glanced at Chu Xiu, and a hint of fear appeared in his eyes. At the same time, he also wanted to retreat. The information that Xian Jialua had given him about Chu Xiu was very old, and in any case, he had severely underestimated Chu Xiu. Although he was not injured and had not used any trump cards, he did not want to continue fighting. Chu Xiu's series of attacks had somewhat exceeded his expectations. In a true life and death battle, even though he was already at the peak of the profound insight of heaven and earth, he still had no confidence in winning. When he looked at Xian Jialua again, he was even more shocked. The burly man on Chu Xiu's side was astonishingly powerful. Xian Jialua threw all sorts of secret techniques at him, but they were all crushed by the burly man with a single punch. No matter what cultivation technique or secret technique he used, he could not withstand a single punch from the burly man. He was smashed into the ground again and again, appearing extremely miserable. Xian Jialua had already reached the half-step martial immortal realm, and was even slightly stronger than him. If Xian Jialua were to lose, how could he continue fighting? At that moment, a series of battle cries rang out in the distance. A large group of barbarians had charged into the Bliss Demon Palace's formation, and began fighting. Green Jade sent people to join forces with the barbarians, and the other barbarian tribes had finally arrived. Although they were a little late, they were not too late. Ming Xuanyu's expression completely changed when he saw this. He immediately shouted, "Retreat! All of you retreat!" This kind of formation was no longer something he could withstand. If they continued fighting, his subordinates would definitely suffer heavy losses. As the people from the Bliss Demon Palace began to retreat, Xian Jialua, who had been suppressed by Chunqing Di all this time, and had even been beaten to the point of vomiting blood, no longer hesitated. His figure moved, and a large amount of solar true fire erupted from his body. Like the sun rising from the east, he rapidly flew into the sky and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Chunqing Di chased after him, but speed was not his forte. He even grumbled gloomily, "We're in the middle of a good fight. Why are you running?" After Xian Jialua and Ming Xuanyu escaped to a safe place, Xian Jialua glared at Ming Xuanyu and shouted, "Ming Xuanyu, what is the meaning of this? It's already been 2 times and each time, you've been the one to escape first. You've taken my things, yet you don't want to work for me?" Ming Xuanyu said indifferently, "Brother Xian, don't take out your anger on me after you've lost. Does it matter whether I ran or not? Chu Xiu's body is incomparably powerful. You didn't even have the slightest chance to retaliate. You've already lost, yet I'm still persisting. Apart from harming my subordinates, what's the point of this? To put it bluntly, the little things you've taken out aren't enough to make up for my losses." Ming Xuanyu's words were reasonable. He had already lost, so there was indeed no point in continuing the fight. However, Xian Jialua couldn't swallow his anger. He had schemed for so long, and even paid a huge price to get Ming Xuanyu to act. Yet, in the end, he returned empty-handed. How could he accept that? Ming Xuanyu consoled, "Brother Xian, it's not that I want to criticize you, but with how powerful the Sanskrit church is, why don't you go back and invite a martial immortal level hall master over? Wouldn't it be enough to forcibly take that Chu Xiu away? Why must you scheme against him yourself?" Xian Jialua calmed down and let out a long sigh. "You make it sound simple, but do you know how serious the internal strife of the Sanskrit church is? I'm not afraid of being laughed at by you, but the Brahma Palace, Shiva Palace, and Vishnu Palace have been fighting for thousands of years. If it weren't for the pressure from the Heavenly Treasure Temple, we might have already started fighting among ourselves. I was just about to take over the position of Palace Lord. Now that I've encountered such a situation that I can't resolve myself, I have to go back and ask someone to resolve it. Who can I ask? The old palace lord is already old. If he were to encounter other martial immortals after such a long journey, there might be an accident. The Shiva palace and the Brahma palace can help, but who will be the one to be humiliated in the end? It's the Vishnu palace itself. Ming Xuanyu was slightly surprised. He didn't expect the internal strife of the Sanskrit church to be so serious. Although the blissful demon palace also had internal strife and power struggles, it was kept to a tolerable degree. If it went too far, the palace lord would intervene. In the end, the internal strife of the Sanskrit church had clearly reached a degree that would affect the interests of the Sanskrit church. Yet, the 9th-level martial immortal of the Sanskrit church still didn't care about it. It was unknown what he was thinking. Brother Xian, if you don't choose to go back to the Sanskrit church to ask for help, what are you going to do? It's not that I'm being immoral, but with just the two of us, we are definitely no match for Chu Xiao. Also, where did that sturdy man with a powerful physical body come from? It's impossible for someone like him to be a nobody. Xian Jialua snorted coldly. Chu Xiao has offended many people in the eastern region. The disciple of the Blood River Church's ancestor Blood River was crippled by someone on his side. Also, the enmity between Cold River City and them is not small. I'll think of a way to see if I can provoke. Before Xian Jialua could finish his words, his expression suddenly changed. He took out a palm-sized formation plate from his bosom. The Sanskrit characters on it flickered. When Xian Jialua finished reading the Sanskrit characters, his expression became extremely unsightly. Ming Xuanyu didn't understand Sanskrit. He asked in surprise, "What's wrong?" Xian Jialua clenched the formation plate and let out a long sigh. He said, "Don't worry about Chu Xiao for now." The previous palace lord of the Vishnu palace has passed away. After saying that, Xian Jialua's figure moved. He used his fastest speed to head west. You're tuning in to the Echoes of the Heart YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.